Okay, so we are in diagram number 7 or sentence number 2 on our worksheet. All right, so we're looking at pattern 7, and this is of the basement videos. And so here we go. Maybe you want to diagram this one rather first on your own and come back, or kind of follow along with me. So this one reads, in a brazen act of bribery, Abby, once again I'm using my third period sentences, Abby stapled a glazed donut to her first quiz. Well, Abby, I do not encourage bribery at all. All right, so that's crazy talk, but I do like donuts. All right, so what I like about this one is it also does a little trickery that we have to kind of get used to. And I think we've talked about it before, but I just want to reinforce it. When we begin a sentence with a prepositional phrase, almost 100% of the time, that prep phrase or series of prep phrases should connect to the verb, because it kind of shows us that the prep phrase can move around. And when something moves around, it's probably an adverb. So when I see in a brazen act of bribery, I know it's right at the beginning of the sentence, but almost resist that temptation to say, well, it's at the beginning of the sentence, so it has to be at the beginning of the sentence when I diagram it. Not in the least. In this case, it's really going to be telling us about that verb stapled. So when I see these two prep phrases, in a brazen act and of bribery, well, this is telling us why she stapled. Why did she staple this glazed donut? If she did it, or how did she do it, or why did she do it in a brazen act of bribery? So I want you to see that these are actually connected back to that verb. So when I get over here, I can see my main parts. In a pattern 7, we're going to be listening for 3 things. We're going to be listening for a subject, which is Abby. We'll be listening for an action verb, which is stapled. And now we're going to be listening for our direct object, which happens a lot in most of our sentences. When we write an action verb sentence, most of the time we do so with the intention of having a direct object. Something that answers what or whom. So we have Abby stapled, and on the other side of that, there should be some kind of direct object. In this case, we'd say Abby stapled what? And she stapled donut. So here's our direct object. All right, to her quiz is in a prep phrase. So she's not stapling the quiz, she's stapling the donut to the quiz. So when I build this guy, I build him close to the top here. I'm telling you, I am on fire with these straight lines tonight, or this morning rather. And so I have a place for my subject, which is going to be Abby. I have a place for my verb, and then so let's add those, just to make sure I'm not too far ahead of myself. So here's Abby. Here is stapled. And a direct object, as we learned in our notes, very particularly has to be a straight line now. So I'm going to put a straight line here. And now I can put my direct object right after this, which is going to be donut. All right, so a couple of reasons, once again, why is the slanted line denotes or lets us know that I'm dealing with either a to-be verb or a linking verb, where a straight line denotes or lets me know that I'm dealing with an action verb. Another reason why this is straight is it's to let me know I'm not going to point backwards. I don't want to point backwards to Abby because Abby is not a donut. So I want to keep that straight to let me know, hey, this noun over here is different from this noun. When we did our sentence patterns, I'll change my color here. We talked about how this is noun phrase 1, but this is noun phrase 2, that this noun phrase is different from this one. Abby is not a donut. All right, so just some basics there. Let's add in some of these fun words we have. It's a donut, glazed donut. All right. If you are going to bribe me, I'm not too picky about the kind of donuts. My favorite flavor is free. So if you can find a free donut, I'll gladly eat it. All right, there we go. And then we have to her first quiz. I know it's a donut, which is right next to the word donut, but that doesn't make sense to say it's a donut to her quiz. I want you to see that to her quiz tells us a location, tells us where she stapled. What I like about the sentence is I have these prep phrases which are far away from the verb, but that's really what they're modifying. It's she stapled it to her quiz. So I'm going to do to quiz, her quiz, first quiz. I'll put that part in first. So we have to quiz, her quiz, first quiz. All right, so once again, it's next to the word donut, but it's not a donut to her first quiz, but she stapled it to her first quiz. And once again, to reinforce what I said at the very beginning of the video, that when I open up with a prepositional phrase, it's probably going to be touching that verb. Almost 100% of the time, it's going to touch that verb. So when I see in a brazen act of bribery, that guy's going to have to touch that verb. So let's start with that first part, which is in a brazen act. All right, so change my color again. Coming down here, so I'm going to say in act, a act, brazen act. And sometimes people hate that. You'll see here in a second what I'm talking about. So I'll say in act. And they like to say the word an act. And I know if it was just simply an act, that would be correct. But the reason I get to use the word a is because of the word brazen. And so we just diagram it exactly as it's written. So a act, brazen act. Brazen means very bold. My line's not long enough there, is it? And then we have of bribery. And once again, just take the prep phrase and say, well, I know it's at the very beginning of the sentence, but he's also right after this prep phrase. And so I want you to see that of bribery describes act. If I tried putting it underneath the word stapled, it wouldn't make sense to say Abby stapled in a brazen act and Abby stapled of bribery. She didn't staple of bribery, but it's an act of bribery. So I didn't give myself a whole lot of room here, did I? I'm going to try to squeeze of and then bribery right here. All right. So it's a little place for the word of, little place for bribery. And that looks pretty good for a pattern 7. All right. You're going to find we use pattern 7s almost all the time. It was the kind of the bigger joke we had in the fall that Chad Royer always said, when in doubt, he just kind of guessed that it was a pattern 7 because that seemed to be what I always relied upon. So this is a pattern 7. Once we learn pattern 7, we learn variations of pattern 7. So we're going to find patterns 8, 9, and 10 are all variations of a pattern 7. We're going to build upon 7 as a base and keep adding different structures to a pattern 7. All right, so the direct object's never going to move, but we're going to add other things to it. So let's take a look at those notes for pattern 8 and then come back here and try diagramming number 3.